We're going to animate the drawings that you've been creating in Rhino by moving them into some more graphically oriented softwares and using those softwares to develop a set of Entourage elements. So we might think about Entourage as being essentially a kind of context for the drawings. So I'm going to just show you a couple of the tools that you'll need for Photoshop, and we're going to start in Photoshop on Monday. So let's look at the Photoshop interface. It'll look very similar in some ways to some of your other Adobe products. So if you've been working in InDesign, you will see kind of a similar setup. We can control the windows that we want to use, and we can set up workspaces that really match the kind of flow of the work that we're going to be doing. So in this case, I'm just using some defaults that I have. Let's move the layers down here into place. And we've got some colors, we've got some brushes, we've got swatches, and these are going to be very similar to what you're going to see in Adobe Illustrator as well. This is the Photoshop side. So Photoshop, unlike Rhino, which is a vector-based program, Photoshop is a pixel-based program. So we're really going to be working with small units, the small pixels. And so we can do photo manipulation, and that's how we're going to create some of the entourage that you're going to want for your drawings. So the first piece of entourage we're going to create is a person. I like doing these scale figures and taking them from real life because you can find photographs of people doing almost anything you want, or you can incorporate the people that you want to incorporate in your photo. So the first thing I'm going to do is select a photo, and then I'm going to import my photo. I'm going to use the place embed command so that my photo gets embedded within the document. And I've chosen this picture of kids playing soccer just so that we have some action in this shot. Another figure that I have used several times is this guy walking across the street. So he can kind of walk through the middle of your project. And the third set I've used is this couple talking on their cell phones. I don't know if they're a couple or not, but there they are, and so they're kind of interesting to use too. Let's actually open them up. Looks like I have some notes there. Well, and that's helpful because here we have some instructions on the photo itself. So let's go ahead and follow through those steps just using this photograph. So one of the kind of important, we're going to go ahead and hit enter to return that. One of the important aspects of the Photoshop area that you're going to want to look at are the layers. So like with Rhino, we can use layers to basically set up different spaces for things that we're trying to accomplish, different layers for different pieces of information. So this photo, this group of photos, as I've imported it, has come into its own layer. You can see that my background is locked. And so if you open a photo using Photoshop, it will end up on your background layer and you will need to unlock it. But in the meanwhile, I would have advised you in any case to copy this photo and move it onto a new layer. So I've imported my image. The next thing I want to do is create a mask. And so if you think of a mask as basically being something which hides part of what is behind it, like a mask for the face, we have openings for the eyes, the nose, maybe the mouth, but it's hiding the rest of the person's face who is wearing the mask. So a mask is sort of similar. We basically will create a outline to hide the background behind these two figures. What that allows us to do, if I were not caring too much about this image, I might just hit my eraser. I might just hit my eraser and start to kind of come and So if I was not too concerned with this image and I didn't care about preserving it, I might just come along with my eraser and start to just sort of take some information out. But if I accidentally did that, I would kind of be in trouble. I would have erased parts of the image that I want. So it's actually a safer practice to create a mask and to hide the things in the background and just reveal the things that are in the foreground. With Photoshop, it's a little bit fussy. You can go back one step with our Command-Z, as we're sort of accustomed to, but you can't go back too far. And if you are in an Adobe product, one of the windows you can choose is History. And so if I were to really mess up and have several mess ups in a row, I can use my history panel to go back and kind of undo some of my badness. If I do that a couple times and I go Z, oh, looks like Adobe Photoshop has sort of improved. You used to only be able to go back one step, but looks like we can go back two now. But I'm going to instead create a mask. So there's a couple different ways that you can select information. And I'm going to go ahead and go through the rasterize process. There's a couple different ways that you can select information with Adobe Photoshop. So we've got a marquee that allows us to select a rectilinear box. And if I cycle through while clicking this, I can get a circular window, or a single line of pixels, or a vertical line of pixels, and the marquee. So the marquees are different sizes and shapes. If I click with the marquee and then go to select my object, I can actually move that whole set of pixels away. And so that can be handy. So marquees are one way to select information. Another way is a set of lassos. So I've got a polygonal lasso where I can kind of make sort of sharp-edged sets of pixels. And again, if I go back to select, I can start to move those pixels around as well. So I have a polygonal lasso. Again, if I'm clicking with Alt, I have what's called a magnetic lasso. And the magnetic lasso, in theory, will sort of stay near the edge of a figure if it can make that figure out. So for example, if I came back here, it wants to hover on the edge of that rail. And I don't know, I don't think that's it can be useful, but it's a little bit imprecise. I might use it to see if I can get kind of around the suit coat of this guy. So if I kind of hover close by, it's not doing a bad job. And probably for a scale figure, I just lost part of his shoulder. That's not too bad a way. Let's go ahead and finish this guy out with the magnetic lasso. And you can see it's not the greatest tracing job, but this is essentially one way to do it. Okay, so we've got this guy. I just made a addition to his coat. Whoops, that was bad. So if I've done something like this, if I go back a couple steps, let's see if I can get out of here. I can actually hit delete and go back a couple steps. So if I really color outside the lines, I can kind of take care of that. I'm going to go back a couple steps there too and just see if I can get back on his pant leg. Okay, so and if I see a spot that I really want to hit kind of more definitively, I can click on that spot. So I say, oh, I really want the edge of that boot. Whoops, let's go back a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to follow his pant leg, and then I'm going to close it. So you can see now, if I zoom out a little bit, that guy is selected. So, if that's all I needed to do and I was in a sort of quick hurry, I might go to this guy and sort of drag him out of position. He's not, it's not horrible, but it's not as precise as I want. So I'm going to just sort of assume that that's not what I want to do. Instead, I'm going to make a mask, and I'm just going to do it around the fellow. And what I'm going to do is, while I have him selected, sometimes it's easier to select the thing that you want, and sometimes it's easier to select everything but the thing that you want. And with a mask, I'm actually defining the space around him. I have him selected. I don't have the space around him selected. So if I have selected this guy, I can actually use, there's a lot of selection tools that we can use. And one of them that is the most useful is called Select Inverse. So if I select inverse, now I have selected everything but that guy. So that's kind of going to be the process for creating the mask. We're going to select all of the areas around the figure, and we're going to apply a mask. The mask looks like this. So you can see here it looks like a frame with a little circle on the inside. And so if I click the mask right now, it has masked my guy. So we're going to do the opposite. So we're actually going to go back and select inverse again, and we're going to mask that guy, right? So now the good news is if I turn this off, that layer off, or if I turn the mask off, if I have a copy of this photo also down on this layer, so that's not really too bad a scale figure. If I wanted to get picky and get really specific, I could zoom into this guy and I could go through and add more areas to the mask or take more areas away. But you can see that as I'm cycling through these different pieces, if I'm selected on this area, I'm on the background. If I'm selected on this zone, but this figure, I'm actually modifying the photo. So this is a place where, again, I could come back in and erase the photo, but I definitely don't want to do that. Instead, I want to modify the mask. So I'm actually going to go out here, and you can see that the mask is basically described as a black and white figure, right? So the part that I'm seeing through is white, and the black is kind of the covering. So if I wanted to add to the mask, I need to either add black or white. So I can add black or white with my paintbrush or with an eraser. So let's just say we want to use the paintbrush. So you can see this is a huge paintbrush, right? So if I add right now, I am adding whatever my color is on the foreground. A brush adds the foreground color. So the default of your two colors is going to be a white and a black. But I can flip-flop those, and if I wanted to use the paintbrush, I want for the black to be in my foreground. Right now the black is in my background. So let's just go ahead and come here, and now as I'm kind of adding black to my mask, I'm able to kind of mask more parts. So if I look at that, that's not very satisfactory. What I'm going to do is change my brush. So I'm painting right now, and when I paint, I have lots of different choices about brushes. I can change the size, I can change the hardness, I can change a lot of different things. So I'm going to keep a hard brush, but I'm going to make it a lot smaller. And I can come in here and just start to, again, kind of clean out a little bit. He looks really skinny, but that's all right. And I could actually clean up some of these areas. Right, kind of clean up that background around his shoe. Make his shoes look snazzier. I think that looks like part of his shoe, but let's go ahead and sort of assume. All right, so this is not looking too bad. I've got that wrinkle in his trousers. So if I went too far, then I would need to go back and add white. So I can flip-flop my colors, and I can add the white back in here. And so again, I'm adding to the whole rather than adding to the background. Okay, let's see if we missed a little bit. No, there. So I can flip-flop that. Okay, it's not too bad. So, that's one approach to creating your kind of scale figure, is that we're going to take away all of the background so that we get, just sort of something that looks a little bit more neutral, and we can start to put him in the background of your building. Okay, so here's our guy. It's not horrible. It's a little, could be a little cleaner. Let's get rid of that horn on his head. Okay, actually I can't really quite tell what's going on there. We'll give him a sort of snazzy hairdo there. Okay, so pretty good. Okay, so there's our guy. He's not bad. All right, so let's go ahead and save it at that point. We'll call him scale figure. And we'll say okay. So he's still a little realistic though. I think you'll find when you're putting Entourage into your drawings that you're not going to want a photorealistic image that is going to detract from the representational quality of your renderings. So I like to abstract these a little bit more. A couple different ways of abstracting the scale figures would be to turn the scale figure into a black and white figure or change their transparency. So we're going to do both of those things next. So the first thing that I'd like to do, I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to move my mask just for a minute, and I'm going to copy everything on this layer, and I'm going to unlock my background and put it on there. Let's see. Okay, and then I'm going to lock this. I'm going to actually turn this off, so just so I have a reserve layer. So we can't see it now. I've turned off the visibility, and I'm going to put my mask back onto this layer, and I'm going to go ahead and accept that mask. Sorry, lady. We're going to apply the layer mask, and now I have this guy just isolated. Okay, so that's good. I lost my instruction, but it's okay. So the next thing that we're going to do is to apply filters. So there's a lot of ways to get this guy to just be, he's a full color right now, but we can get it to grayscale by two primary methods. One is pretty easy. We can go to Image, Adjustments, and we can go to Hue and Saturation. Actually, let's do it two ways. We can go to Mode, Image Mode, Grayscale. Right, so that's one way of turning him gray, and he'll say yes. Discard the color information. Now he's a grayscale guy. So that's pretty easy. Another way to do it, and this is useful for other kinds of steps that you might want to take as well, is to use the hue and saturation, which is also under Image. Right, so if I go to Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, I'll get this set of sliders that tell me a little bit about how to control color information on my image. But if I take my saturation, first I could take my hue, I could start to, kind of do all sorts of strange things to him, right? Which is interesting, but probably not appropriate. But if I take my saturation up, I can also make him super bright. Or if I take it down, I can basically take all of the color out, wash it out to a grayscale. So that's another way of sort of turning it into grayscale. If I say, I'm going to cancel that because I want to show you that you can also find that here. If I'm on my Layers menu and I click under here, I've got several different kinds of filters that I can apply to images. And they control all sorts of things from the colors to hue, saturation, color balance, vibrance, etc. So again, I could go to my hue saturation, use my sliders again to take him down to grayscale. So I'm happy with that. So here's my guy. The next thing though, I want to keep my layers open so I can see. So you see hue and saturation is sort of like an effect that we've laid over the top of a photograph, right? So if I hide that, my color information is still there. If I use this filter, it basically shows it to be transparent. So the third thing that I'm going to do with this guy, right, is to make him transparent. And I like that effect in images because then it really allows him not to have such a kind of heavy presence in a drawing. So if I'm wanting to select, I have to be on this area. I can use my marquee and select all of the pixels in there. And I can get to my transparency a couple different ways. I can come into this area in my layers and change my whole layer. And I can make that whole layer sort of fairly transparent, right? I can actually just sort of move anywhere along that spectrum. And that's going to be giving me sort of lots of effects. So there's my 100%. That's looking like about 80%. And I'm not thrilled with that. I think I want just a little bit more. Okay, so 84%. So that's how I'm going to turn this guy into a scale figure. And now I'm going to want to export this. I will want to export, and just like in Rhino, when we export a PNG file, we will get a file that has a transparent background. So this little checker box is indicating that there is no background to this figure. If I turn this on, I've got that photo again. Oh, my little guy has moved. But I don't want that on. I just want this figure, and I'm going to export. Quick export as PNG, and we'll call him scale figure 1.